There is a still moment you know intimately, a moment when the world outside continues its relentless rotation, the faint drone of the city, the distant sound of traffic, the almost imperceptible glow of screens reflected on apartment windows. But inside you, the emotional clock seems to have stopped entirely. It's an internal freeze frame that separates you from the flow of ordinary life. This is not the grand, dramatic isolation portrayed in literature. It is a quiet, heavy suspension. You realize that this state of solitude isn't always a preference for your own company, nor a simple lack of social opportunity. It is more often a circumstance, a complex, learned adaptation. It is the profound silence in your chest when you realize that your internal world, your rich tapestry of thoughts and observations, is operating without a single external witness. This is not the peaceful quiet of choosing to be alone. It is the deep, unnerving silence that settles when you desperately want to share a victory, a dark joke, or a sudden realization. But the established neural pathway to reach out simply won't fire. This is the hidden reality for millions who find themselves without the kind of deep, reliable connections that tether a person to the world. They are not defined by a lack of social grace, but by a powerful, learned psychological adaptation. We often make the easy assumption that these individuals are simply antisocial, that they lack the fundamental appetite for human connection. But that assumption misses the agonizing paradox at the heart of the experience. Many people navigating deep isolation crave authenticity and belonging more intensely than anyone else. They have experienced the absence of genuine connection so deeply, understood its true value so acutely, that their entire psychological structure has reorganized, attempting to save them from a pain they have already encountered too many times. Think of it this way. The absence of a genuine, consistent mirror makes us forget what we look like. Without friendship to reflect our positive qualities back to us, we become vulnerable to an internal distortion field, where our flaws are magnified and our strengths are minimized. This is where the quiet terror resides. The question we need to ask, then, is not the judgmental one, why they are alone, but the compassionate, analytical one. What is the hidden defense mechanism that has systematically built a life around the absence of connection? This is the core pain. It is the realization that the thing you need the most, unfiltered connection, is the thing your body has been rigorously trained to fear the most. This conflict creates an internal tremor, a subtle but constant anxiety beneath the surface of everyday life. This is the truth of modern loneliness. It is a wound that has been carefully bandaged by the body itself, leaving you safe, yet entirely numb to the potential joys of the outside world. The psychology is complex, built on a foundation of small betrayals, unnoticed withdrawals, and the inevitable disappointments that teach the brain a singular, devastating lesson. Expecting less is safer than hoping for more. This is where the quiet intensity of their inner life takes root, becoming both a necessary refuge and a profound, limiting prison. The isolation is a heavy stillness that is almost impossible to move through. To truly dissect this phenomenon, we must look past the observable social behaviors, the declined invitations, the excused absences, and examine the internal architecture of the self. We all possess the natural human tendency to construct a sanctuary within our own minds, a private space where the vigilant mask of social performance can finally be removed. But for those navigating deep isolation, this sanctuary subtly and tragically transforms itself into something far more complex: the perfect cage. This cage is not made of visible bars. It is meticulously constructed from threads of hyper-vigilance and the cold steel of suspicion. Its sole, overriding purpose is to keep out the pain of betrayal, exclusion, and disappointment that has wounded you in the past. In a cruel twist of logic, it works perfectly. By preemptively rejecting risk, it guarantees emotional survival. Yet, in guaranteeing survival, it equally ensures that no authentic warmth, no genuine connection can ever fully enter. The safety it provides is absolute, but the cost is total numbness. Inside this cage, you develop an unnatural clarity. You become a connoisseur of human behavior, an anthropologist of connection. You observe the effortless way others form alliances, share casual intimacy, and lean on each other for support. You analyze their laughter, their subtle shifts in eye contact, and the easy pleasantries that seem to glue their world together. This observational role grants you a strange, often painful form of emotional intelligence. You can spot insincerity from across the room. You know precisely when the smile doesn't fully engage the eyes. You pick up on the unspoken social hierarchies that others remain blind to. This ability to see the seams and mechanics of social theater is a profound gift, but it is also a source of paralyzing cynicism. The sharper your sight becomes, the harder it is to participate. You realize you are an expert at the game of connection, yet your armor, the very thickness of your protective layer, makes you functionally unable to play. You observe the joy of others, but the deep emotional knowing that it might be temporary, conditional, or even performative keeps you tethered to the safety of your own mind. Your greatest depth, born from years of solitary introspection and observation, suddenly feels like your most profound barrier. You exist as a perpetual outsider, gazing into the warmth while protected by the cold efficiency of your own making. This internal world is incredibly rich, a refuge where judgment is absent, but it eventually becomes a prison, isolating you from the necessary external challenges that could refine your thinking and validate your identity. This isn't just a behavioral pattern, it's a deep-seated biological recalibration. When researchers observe the long-term effects of social isolation, they find that the mind doesn't merely miss companionship, it structurally adapts to its absence. This is the profound defensive power of neuroplasticity at work. The brain, seeking efficiency and survival, begins to prune and weaken the neural pathways associated with social cognition, the areas responsible for recognizing subtle facial expressions, interpreting complex social cues, and, most crucially, engaging the internal reward centers linked to bonding start to atrophy. It's an evolutionary mechanism. If a system is repeatedly activated and consistently results in disappointment, stress, or perceived threat, the body labels that system as high cost and inefficient. The brain, in an act of involuntary self-preservation, chooses to switch off the longing to minimize the resulting internal damage. We analyze this mechanism through the lens of social anhedonia, the specific inability to derive pleasure or reward from social interaction. This is not a willful, conscious rejection of others. It is an emotional shutdown enforced by the lower brain. The crucial distinction here is that the brain's reward system, which relies on the release of dopamine for motivation and oxytocin for bonding, simply stops firing for potential friendship because the perceived cost of disappointment has become neurochemically untenable. The pain signal is stronger than the potential reward signal. Your nervous system has effectively been rewired, creating a kind of fading map. The neurological geography of connection is slowly and efficiently erased to ensure your emotional survival in a perceived environment of perpetual social scarcity and threat. This biological shift reinforces the behavioral withdrawal. When you do encounter a social situation, your brain is already working with diminished capacity for connection, leading to a clumsy or awkward execution. This poor performance then feeds back into the system, confirming the brain's initial suspicion that social engagement is futile or harmful. The result is a cycle where biological protection enforces behavioral isolation, making the emotional and physical cost of reaching out feel insurmountably high. The mind has prioritized stability over vitality, and the consequence is a life lived in a low-energy, highly defended state. The depth of this change means that rebuilding connection is not about willpower. It is about retraining a deeply entrenched neurological defensive posture. The neuroscientific changes we've discussed immediately translate into behavior through a rigid, systematic defense mechanism known as hyper-vigilance. It is crucial to understand that this is not an inherent personality flaw. It is a learned trauma response, a survival mechanism that has been reinforced over time. Past experiences, the quiet moments of exclusion, the loud hurts of betrayal, or the simple devastating feeling of being forgotten, imprinted a singular, powerful lesson onto the deep structures of your brain. Vulnerability equals pain, and trust equals inevitable disappointment. Your nervous system, prioritizing absolute protection, established a sophisticated psychological filter. This filter operates automatically, designed to instantly interpret all ambiguous or neutral social signals as potentially threatening. A simple delay in a text message response is not processed as mere busyness. it is automatically flagged as concrete evidence of apathy or disrespect. A canceled plan is swiftly translated into confirmation of your low social value. You are no longer processing social data objectively. You are perpetually hunting for evidence to support the pre-existing hypothesis that you will ultimately be hurt. This chronic hypervigilance is the very fuel for the self-sabotage loop. Because you are deeply expecting rejection, you unconsciously engage in behaviors designed to preemptively manage that pain. You maintain emotional distance, share only highly curated information, or project an air of quiet self-sufficiency. By initiating the distance yourself, you ensure the potential connection fails, thereby validating your original suspicion that you were right to be cautious. You have traded the risk of external rejection for the certainty of internal isolation. This is a profound and deeply painful irony. The very protective mechanism that once served as your emotional shield against past harm now stands as the impenetrable wall preventing you from accessing the one thing your heart desperately needs: authentic, unguarded connection. This vigilance consumes an enormous amount of cognitive energy. Every social encounter becomes an analysis, an event meticulously cross-referenced with past trauma, leading to constant emotional exhaustion. Over time, being alone ceases to be a comfortable choice and evolves into the only energetically optimized action. You choose the predictable, hollow certainty of isolation over the unpredictable, exhausting struggle of social engagement. This sustained isolation is ultimately a cold, yet intelligent, response from a brain that is simply too weary to fight for connection anymore. The deep psychological mechanisms we've explored, the neurological shutdown, the hypervigilance, and the self-sabotage loop, all converge on a single poignant paradox that defines the isolated individual. It is not that you lack the capacity for love or friendship, it is that the emotional cost of entry has become astronomically high. This brings us to the core MindRabbit insight, the rewired thermostat. Your internal emotional thermostat, calibrated by past wounds, is now set to an incredibly high standard for safety. For the average person, a simple act of genuine kindness, a casual invitation, or a shared comfortable silence registers immediately as warm and safe. But for you, given the high cognitive and emotional cost of past vulnerability, your required temperature is far above normal. An act must be demonstrably consistent, profoundly authentic, and seemingly unconditional to register as safe or trustworthy. Anything less registers as lukewarm, or worse, suspicious. A potential precursor to betrayal. This is why the craving for connection is so often met with inaction. You are waiting. You are waiting for someone who can effortlessly bypass the years of defenses you've built. Someone who instantly understands and accepts the immense emotional depth and complexity you carry. You wait for someone who demonstrates interest far beyond mere social obligation. In essence, you are waiting for a connection at 100 degrees, when most healthy, enduring relationships begin building trust and intimacy at a modest 50 degrees. Your profound emotional sensitivity, the ability to see the seams and read the unspoken subtext of social interactions, is both your wisdom and your current curse. This depth prevents you from engaging in the slow, uncertain, and often awkward buildup that most genuine friendships require. You want to skip the small talk and dive straight into the profound existential conversation, believing that if they can handle that, they can handle you. But most people need the small talk, the trivial buffer, to gradually assess safety. Your rejection of superficiality, while noble, becomes a fatal preemptive strike against possibility. You are trapped between the intense burning craving for depth and the paralyzing inability to risk the shallow, necessary beginning. The tragedy is that this weight, born from wisdom and self-protection, keeps the perfect cage firmly locked, perpetuating the very isolation it was built to prevent. You stand guard over a fortress that no one can breach, least of all yourself. The constant low-grade energetic cost of maintaining this hyper-vigilant defense system takes a profound toll on your identity and your fundamental perception of time. Without the regular corrective mirror of consistent friendship, without others reflecting your positive qualities, validating your struggles, or simply calling you out on your occasional absurdities, your self-image becomes increasingly distorted. You focus relentlessly on perceived flaws, minimizing your true strengths, and convincing yourself, against all rational evidence, that you have nothing genuinely valuable to offer in a relationship. This forms the basis of the identity prison, where your self-worth is determined solely by an internal, unverified, and often hostile narrator. You are trapped with the most critical version of yourself, and you lack the external evidence needed to successfully appeal that verdict. Furthermore, isolation fundamentally alters your experience of time. Time doesn't flow naturally as a sequence of shared events and experiences. It accumulates. Weekends, which for others are punctuated by plans, gatherings, and social anchors, stretch endlessly for you, often feeling like vast, empty landscapes. Holidays and birthdays become poignant reminders of absence and what's missing rather than celebrations to enjoy. The lack of shared milestones means time can feel both empty and heavy, devoid of the familiar emotional markers. Simultaneously, you accumulate stories, thoughts, observations, and deep emotional experiences, hoarding them in the eternal hope that someday, someone truly safe will arrive to share them with. This is an emotional hoarding strategy, but the accumulation is too great. By the time a potential connection arrives, the weight of years of unexpressed life is too much to manage. You realize you cannot simply dump this immense backlog onto a new person without overwhelming and terrifying them away. The very depth you possess, born from this isolation, becomes a suffocating barrier to the shallow entry points of new relationships. This forced confrontation with the self, while painful, does yield a perverse strength. The absence of external validation forces you to discover your own identity through internal exploration. You become, necessarily, a connoisseur of your own company, developing hobbies and passions that are truly your own, uninfluenced by social pressure. This grants you a profound autonomy, a self-knowledge and independence that many who are constantly socially tethered never develop. This is the unwanted gift of isolation, a powerful, hard-won inner life. If deep, sustained isolation is indeed a complex cage built by a nervous system that was trying to protect itself, then the path forward is not a sudden, reckless leap out, but a careful, measured process of neurological and behavioral retraining. The first step toward change requires radical acceptance of a specific condition: social rustiness. The fundamental skills of connection, the nuance of conversation, the timing of shared vulnerability, the ability to read and match emotional energy have atrophied from disuse. What once felt instinctive and effortless now requires conscious, taxing effort. This often manifests as overwhelming anxiety about poor social performance, which immediately triggers the old defense mechanisms, confirming the entrenched belief that you are inherently not good at relationships. This tightening feedback loop is mechanical and learned, not a reflection of your inherent worth. The work, therefore, is not about suddenly finding your soulmate tribe or engaging in toxic motivational cliches. It is about practicing low stakes, imperfect exposure. It is the slow, deliberate work of engaging in small, trivial interactions and immediately resisting the urge to excessively analyze or punish yourself for perceived failures afterward. The goal is to incrementally teach your nervous system, your rewired thermostat, that a low-level, 50-degree warmth, a casual chat, a fleeting shared moment is genuinely safe, and that not every small disappointment requires a full-scale emotional shutdown. This is the core behavioral shift, prioritizing consistency over intensity in social exposure. This process involves deliberately practicing allowing yourself to be awkward. You must consciously choose vulnerability, not as a massive, sweeping gesture, but as a series of small, manageable risks. Share a simple, authentic thought. Ask a non-transactional question. The deepest recovery begins with accepting that your protective mechanisms once served a vital purpose. They kept you safe when safety was scarce. Now, you can gently begin to acknowledge their service and let them rest, creating a small, necessary space for hope. Your hard-won self-knowledge, your profound depth, your acute sensitivity, your ability to see beneath the shallow surface of human interaction are not obstacles to connection. They are exactly what makes you worthy of the rare, authentic friendship you crave. The journey begins with the quiet courage to carry that self-knowledge out of the identity prison and into the world, accepting that you may stumble, but knowing that the cost of remaining inert is far higher than the risk of engaging. The deepest peace is found not in the absence of risk, but in the acceptance of it. Perhaps the challenging journey toward authentic human connection begins not with finding someone else to talk to, but with finding the quiet, compassionate language needed to finally understand and liberate the carefully constructed stillness within yourself.